My name is Waffles, and I'm a government whistleblower turned political commentator, and this is the last 24 hours in the news. Today is January 17th, 2025. It is 11:58 p.m. It's almost tomorrow. We have 2 minutes until tomorrow. It is 11:58 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. In today's news highlights, a U.S. citizen was killed in Kiev missile barrage. The State Department confirmed that a 62-year-old American man was killed during a massive overnight drone and missile strike in Kiev, one of the deadliest assaults on the city so far this year. Russia has also opened a new front in Sumy, eastern Ukraine. U.S. officials strongly condemned the strikes, and Ukraine marked Wednesday as a day of mourning with at least 16 dead and over 13 injured. The New York City mayoral candidate was arrested by ICE. Brad Lander, New York City comptroller and candidate for mayor, was detained at an immigration court by ICE after questioning the agency and requesting a warrant, triggering widespread bipartisan backlash. Officials described the arrest as a shocking abuse of power and political intimidation, with Lander denying assault allegations and highlighting the city's immigrant-friendly stance. The gross old man who paints himself orange accelerates Middle East escalation. At the G7 summit, the gross old man who paints himself orange demanded unconditional surrender from Iran, demanded Tehran evacuate civilians, and left the summit early to return to D.C. amid tensions. He is also advocating for Russia's return to the G8. So it would be the G8 instead of the G7 if Russia were to join, which continues investigating trade and defense policies and preparing to sign a U.S.-UK trade agreement. So the gross old man who paints himself orange is trying to advocate for Russia to return to the G8 and is investigating trade and defense policies and preparing to sign a U.S.-UK trade agreement. House saboteur Mike Johnson delays Israel visit. House saboteur Mike Johnson postponed a planned June 22nd visit to Israel due to rising security concerns in the region. U.S. elevated travel warnings to level 4. Do not travel to Israel. Meanwhile, U.S. Embassy operations in Jerusalem are closed through Friday due to heightened threats. Senate approves stablecoin regulation framework. The U.S. Senate passed a bill to establish a regulatory framework for dollar-backed stablecoin cryptocurrency tokens, marking a milestone for the crypto industry. TikTok divestiture deadline extended. The White House announced it will grant ByteDance a third 90-day extension on the divestiture deadline for TikTok's U.S. operations, delaying the congressionally mandated sale or shutdown by another quarter. Here are the top international news highlights from the past 24 hours. Israel-Iran conflict escalates. The air war enters its sixth day, with both nations launching missile strikes, Israel targeting Iranian nuclear facilities, and Iran striking cities like Tel Aviv and Haifa. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Casualties are mounting. Over 400 killed in Iran, including civilians and senior military figures. At least 14 Israelis killed and hundreds wounded. U.S. has deployed additional fighter jets to the Middle East in a defensive move. Global markets react. Oil prices are elevated but contained near $73 a barrel, while global equities lose ground amidst risk-off sentiment. Safe havens like Treasury bonds, gold, and the Swiss franc are gaining appeal. The Bank of Japan and U.S. Fed maintained steady policy, indicating central banks are navigating caution amid geopolitical stress. UN Human Rights Office in Geneva may move. The UN is considering relocating its Human Rights Office from Palais Wilson, I don't know if I'm saying that right, by mid-2026 due to budget cuts largely influenced by the current U.S. withdrawal from multilateral funding. Tech sector layoffs continue. Major global companies, including Intel, Disney, Meta, Microsoft, and Morgan Stanley, are implementing further staff reductions tied to restructuring and AI-related efficiency shifts. I don't believe that. What I do know is that Meta was introducing AI users to interact with the public, so any statement about AI doing stuff is highly questionable considering some of the things that I've seen Meta doing recently. Peace conference postponed. The proposed UN conference on Israel-Palestine in New York, originally set for June 17th through 20th, has been postponed amid regional military escalation. Israel-Iran conflict intensifies. Okay, I think I've got the same thing, yeah. Alright, so here are some significant recent U.S. court dates involving actions by Congress members. The gross old man who paints himself orange's administration or current politicians. Key legal actions, appeals court review. The gross old man who paints himself orange's troop deployment to Los Angeles. What's happening? A federal appeals court is reviewing a lower court's ruling that the gross old man who paints himself orange exceeded legal authority under the Insurrection Act by deploying 4,000 National Guard and 700 Marines to Los Angeles amid immigration protests, potentially usurping state governor control. Cities sue DHS over withheld anti-terror funds. Who's involved? That would be Chicago, San Francisco, Seattle, Denver, and Boston. Allegation is that DHS unlawfully froze securing the city's counter-terror funds, putting public safety and event preparedness, e.g. the Super Bowl or the World Cup, at risk. Federal court blocks the gross old man who paints himself orange's cuts to local health funding. Affected regions would be Harris, Texas, Columbus, Ohio, Nashville, Tennessee, Kansas City, Missouri. A judge issued a preliminary injunction stating that $32.7 million in pandemic-era health funding that the gross old man who paints himself orange's administration attempted to revoke. Judge halts DoD research funding cuts at universities. Major institutions like MIT and Johns Hopkins are the ones suing. The outcome, a federal judge granted a temporary restraining order against the gross old man who paints himself orange's policy, capping indirect research reimbursements at 15%, effectively pausing a potential $900 million in annual cuts. Additional noteworthy cases: National Urban League v. Trump, or the gross old man who paints himself orange, filed February 2025 based on executive orders curbing DEI policies and gender ideology programs. AFGE versus Trump, i.e. the gross old man who paints himself orange. Federal labor unions sued in Northern District of California, challenging mass layoffs and workforce reduction orgs. A restraining order blocked those cuts. Washington versus the gross old man who paints himself orange, or Donald Trump. States filed suit to block the gross old man who paints himself orange's January executive order restricting birthright citizenship. The Ninth Circuit upheld a preliminary injunction. Associated Press versus Budowich. The AP sued White House press officials alleging First Amendment violations over restricted access. A judge initially ordered access resumed. Those stayed and pending appeal. And that will be it for our current updates as far as the last 24 hours in the news. Today is now June 18th, 2025. It is 12:07 a.m. Mountain Standard Time.